I mean, the clause in the truth theory says something like, if A is true, then not A is
Not true.
not true. If A is not true, then not A is true. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, now, it seems that, of course, all these explanations have an appearance of circularity because use is not in the meta language. But if anyone is to be credited with a grasp of those principles, well, then he must have some notion of negation, which is for something not to be the case. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to say that he grasps that principle.
No, it doesn't make sense to say that if what?
If he doesn't have some notion of negation or some conception of what it is for something not to be the case, he can't grasp that principle governing the negation operator in his language.
You seem constantly to be pushing me to try to answer a question that seems to me to have no answer. And that is, now we know how he uses this expression in connection with a lot of his behavior and so forth. Now tell me what it is that he understands. And I don't feel as though that there's something left over to find out. I mean, aside from what seems to me to be rather extraneous.
Let me try and get at it another way. You speak as though being willing to use certain forms of argument fixes the meanings of the essential words involved in that argument. In this case, we're just thinking of the logical constants.
Well, I'm especially thinking of the logical constants.
Yes, that's what we were talking about. Right. Sure. All right. Just apply to the logical constant. Well, now, is that assumption correct? I mean, could one just have any old set of rules of inference and learn to obey them, and that would itself fix intelligible meanings for the logical constants involved?
I'm not sure what the rules are that you're talking about.
Any old set of rules. I mean, well, let us suppose that there are some consistent set of rules. Because if they're not consistent, perhaps they'll run into a mess quite quickly.
How are they going to learn these rules?
They're just taught to argue that way. They imitate others. And everybody accepts such reasoning, and
we tell them.
Perhaps we don't tell them, perhaps they just imitate. I mean, how do we... Your speakers obey certain rules. Right? That they infer A from A and B.
Well, no, I don't see them following rules at all. I see them behaving this way. I'm the one who's cooking up the rules, not
behaving in accordance with certain principles of inference. Was that not what you meant?
Yes, but that's not exactly how I think is the best way to put it. if these are propositions that they're dealing with, then those propositions have certain logical connections. If they act as if they didn't know what those connections were, then I would say those are not the propositions I thought they were. And if I can't find any propositions to assign to their sentences so that they are being more or less rational, I'm going to say I don't have no reason to think they're thinking or saying anything. So unless I can discover a rational pattern in the way they use these sentences, and that also coheres with the contents that I give to the individual sentences on the basis of how they behave with them in the world, if I can't do that, I just don't know what they're talking about. So I'm not saying they've internalized some rules, unless that just means they act in a regular way, or more or less, of course, regular way, which I can make out to be rational. That is more or less in accord with the logical relations between the sentences that they're using. Otherwise I have no good reason to suppose I've identified the content of their speech.
Well, now look, you could come across people who spoke a language in which there was some logical constant. I mean, you make out that it is a logical constant because it's a connective,
okay,
a sentential connective, so they regularly form complex sentences using it, but it doesn't fit, won't fit any of the ones we normally use. Their behavior, linguistic behavior, and other behavior doesn't fit the interpretation of it as or if or and. So you search around and you might hit on an interpretation, right?
How?
Well, what they say and do makes sense if it's neither nor.
Oh, I see.
Or something like that.
Yeah, fine.
This is just one case.
I see.
So if you admit that, you must also admit that you could come across another lot of people who have some connective, let's say, binary connective, which only half fits with one that we use. I mean, half fits in the sense that they will reason with sentences involving this connective, sometimes reason as we should reason. But other pieces of reasoning which involve it, which we should have thought were perfectly all right, if it meant or, they won't accept.